Okay, I think we are live now. Uh, Welcome, Tatyana, to our second episode of Data Driven podcast that I run with my co host, Rose. I'll give a quick introduction of myself and I'll let Rose introduce herself and then I'll introduce Tatyana. Um, so I'm Rana. I consult with high growth startups and help them drive 10x product growth. I've driven over $60 million in impact by applying product growth led growth principles. Please schedule time via Calendly to if you're looking to build a growth engine at your company. And Rose, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Rana. Hi. So I'm Rosalind. You can call me Rose. I'm a data engineer by trade, and I love working with complex data systems. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I love to talk to anyone about anything data. Yeah, back to you, Rana.
So, as I mentioned before, we are co-hosts of Data Driven Podcast, and this is our second episode. We generally have open conversations about how data can help with decisions. And if you're interested in connecting with data-driven practitioners, please join our Slack group. We will share it. The link is already there in the description, but happy to share it in comments as well. And today we will be talking with Tatyana Mamut. Tatyana is a transformative leader in Silicon Valley. She led the development of successful new products at Amazon, Salesforce, and Nextdoor. She currently sits on the board of Sauce Labs and advises startups, investment funds, and venture studios. She's dedicated to making the world better through human centered product development leadership, especially as we move forward into a multi sapient future with AI. She is teaching a product innovation course at Reforge in February of 2024. If you want to join that class, please follow her on LinkedIn, and she will be sharing information about the class as more information comes forward. And today we'll be talking about what to do when execs ignore your data. So with that, I want to bring Tatyana and ask her a quick question. Tatyana, is there anything you want to share with the audience before we dive into some questions?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Rana and Rose, for inviting me on. I do want to quickly acknowledge that we're talking about talking during a very strange moment in time in history. And I really appreciate being here with the two of you because, we were just talking about this, if it's okay to share, Rana. You're Muslim, I'm Jewish, Rose, you have a different background as well. And I just really hope that we remember that all of us have so much more in common and so much love for each other, and that the ideology isn't what we are. So with that, yeah, let's dive into the actual topic.
Peace is all we can hope for, and I hope that happens sooner than later. Um, Thank you for sharing that emotion, Tatyana. Hopefully, us coming together sets an example for more people to see human side of each other rather than see the differences in each other. And just so you know, my background is my dad is Hindu and my mom is Muslim. And so that was not easy growing up in India as well.
Mm.
So I take the viewpoint of bringing people together more than bringing people apart because on one side it's my dad and the other side it's my mom. And when I see Hindus and Muslims fight in India, it just breaks my heart because I can't take either sides. Both are blood relatives of mine. So just wanted to share that as a data point for what's going on in the world right now. We don't need religious differences.
We don't.
Okay, so let's help us unveil the curtain, Tatyana.
Mhm.
You've been a CPO at various large companies. Give us a glimpse into, what executives do with data on a daily basis.
Yeah. So one of the things that is very challenging in being a product leader is that there are so many pieces of data from so many different places that are coming at you all the time. And from any particular perspective of the people who are producing the data, it looks like this is the most important data. So, product managers hopefully are using tools like Pendo and, kind of plug-in tools into their websites if they're doing product-driven growth. And and they have all of these dashboards and all of this data, and they're bringing their data to executives. And then the sales team, right, has all of this data also from their tools. So the sales team is bringing other data. And then there's financial data. And then there's competitive data that's coming in from the marketing team. And what I think one of the things that makes and I'm just going to say, I hear a lot of product managers get very frustrated because they feel like, my executives say they want me to be data driven, but then I bring them all this data and then they ignore it. They're not necessarily ignoring it. It's just that they have lots of other pieces of data coming in that they need to make sense of and either synthesize with the product data or start to recognize which piece of data they currently need to focus on. And so from an executive point of view, what's really hard is not that there is a lot of data, and people talk about that all the time. It's like there's a lot of data, but there's not enough actionable data. A lot of times people see dashboards, but they don't really know the so what behind them. That's a whole other conversation we can have. But I would really like, especially product leaders and data scientists, to understand the perspective of an executive who is seeing so many other data points coming in, right? Their board members might be sending them articles and data points, right? They're getting, data points as well from lots of industry analysts and from other reports that they're seeing. And so they're just overwhelmed with all of these viewpoints, and making your data relevant to them means taking their viewpoint and then synthesizing what are all of the other things that they're seeing in order to help them make the best decision. So often what I find is that the best data presentations actually ask more questions than give answers, right? It's one thing to present some insights, but it's another thing to say, here's the data that we're observing. How might I ask a question in this presentation of the sales leadership about whether the product data that I'm seeing aligns with the sales anecdotes or the sales objections that they're hearing, right? How might I bridge the gap between what my data is showing me on the product side and what other functions might be seeing? And how do I create and craft really interesting questions that bring all these things together so that the executive can feel like this is a company conversation, not just a product conversation?
Awesome. Awesome. To that effect, tell us sort of leaders whom you have seen uh, do a good job. So you talked about questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Asking related questions. Um, so give us a sample of an example of someone whom you worked with that has done a good job of this. It doesn't have to be the name of the person, but sort of the process they followed.
Yeah, I mean, so I have to say, I just, finished a stint at Pendo building Adopt, and I feel that there are some exceptional product leaders there that, again, tons of data, right? We're Pendo, so we're in the we're in the data all the time, and a lot of our presentations are really focused around product data. And there is even a bias, right, in the company with the CEO to really value the product data as well. However, we built an incredible, and a lot of the product leaders that I saw there built an incredible relationship with the sales leadership and the marketing leadership, because we had, meetings where it wasn't just a presentation about here's the product data, here's the roadmap, here's how we're going to move these metrics. A lot of times there was a pause, and we would have like a first round of planning for like quarterly planning. We would have a first round of planning, present the data, present the plan. And then in the end of that first round, we would pause and say, we'd like to get feedback from the sales team. Does this match what you're hearing from potential customers? What in this list of potential items would really help you move the needle in closing deals for the next quarter or the next 6 months? And then on the marketing side, right, like to say, okay, before the presentation, ideally, you'd actually have, two pieces of data, the product data, the marketing data, and then you'd have a conversation about how these overlap. So that was the first round. And then based on those conversations, then you would present a second round, right? Where again, ideally everybody on the go-to-market team has already aligned on the product data, or maybe you actually say, you know what, if we were just looking at the product data, we probably think this is the most important thing. But after talking to a more holistic set of stakeholders, we actually recognize that we should probably lean into this. So one of the things I often hear product managers talk about, especially in a less mature product, is that people are complaining about the user experience. Like, there are problems in the user experience, there are problems in the user experience after onboarding, right? Like after kind of they've gotten in there. And yet when you talk to the salespeople, they're saying like the product doesn't demo well, right? Like I'm having trouble demoing a really compelling product to get the customer to sign. And so what you have more data about is a bad user experience, because that's actually what your dashboards are plugged into. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? You don't have your dashboards plugged into the demos that the salespeople are doing and how difficult it is for them to wow the customer, right? However, when you hear that even anecdotal data from salespeople, what I, as a product leader, realize is we never get most of our customers to that bad user experience, because fewer people are buying the product. So step one, get more people to buy the product. Step two, make it easy to onboard onto the product. And step three, then fix all those bad user experiences. You can't skip to step three, even though your dashboards are telling you that's where, the most, the lowest NPS scores are, for example. Don't tie yourself to that. Actually go through a much more holistic, cross-functional discovery process to really understand what aspects of your data are important or not. It's not just a product decision, especially in B2B.
Awesome. No, absolutely. No, thank you for that. Actually, thinking through a B2B SaaS solution, SaaS product that has a go-to-market strategy where sales is deeply involved and marketing is deeply involved is a different beast. And let's actually talk about your time at Nextdoor, because at Nextdoor, the product was more of a consumer product.
Mm-hmm.
And may or may not be sales teams involved. Talk about situations like that. So how do you think a product manager could do a better job there?
Yeah. So first of all, there are salespeople involved, right? Because the people who pay for the product are advertisers. So
Good
it
to
is
know.
actually a B2B product. It's actually interesting, right? Because people think social media is a B2C product. It's actually not. It's a B2B product because for me, who is the customer? The customer is the person who pays for your experience. So in any case, but you definitely need to create great experiences for the users, right? The users who are not the customers, but they are the users of the product. And you need, basically to keep them engaged, to make them happy. And so the same thing happens though, is that there are so many things that are happening at the level of making sense of the data. Again, most social media companies have tons and tons of dashboards. Their primary innovation motion, especially for incremental innovation, is A/B testing. And so you've got a lot of those dashboards built in. And I think it's very important to have a product leader to kind of zoom out and say, okay, just because the A/B test showed this, what are the implications? Where is this going? Might this be taking us? And I think we see this with the lawsuits that Facebook is facing right now, right? Their main way of innovating was just follow the numbers. More engagement, give people more of that. Don't stop and think about it. Don't stop and think about what it means, right? 13-year-old girls are getting more engaged when you show them bulimic content, then show them more bulimic content, right? More content that's actually really bad for them. And again, the job of a great leader is to stop people and say, okay, this is what the numbers say, but what does it mean? And where does it take us as an organization if we don't question these numbers and we don't double click? Where it often
I want to
leads.
actually double click on that, Tatyana. So I'm a huge fan of Reforge. I know you're going to be teaching at a class at product on product innovation at Reforge soon. And when I joined their first course like 5 years ago, my whole thing was like, these guys are just going to teach me data, right? That was sort of my sort of in like what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
And the first slide that comes out, I remember Brian was very involved in those days, was like, it all begins with the user.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just take that mantra and apply to what you're just telling, right? Data doesn't mean anything if you don't understand the user and their context and the segment of the user.
If you don't understand if you don't understand the user, if you don't understand the context, and you don't understand the culture, I would actually say it's not just the individual, but it's also how the individual interacts within the social context and the cultural context of what you're creating, right? And in the case of Instagram, which is, by the way, one of the most toxic products I have ever experienced in my life, I would argue at the level of cigarettes, or AK-47s, like just an awful product. I've never been on Instagram. From the moment I saw it, I was like, there is nothing good about this thing. Because it's so obviously addictive. It is so obviously an ego-driven experience that makes people it creates insecurity. It creates a culture of insecurity, and it amplifies, right, how all of the negative emotions that people have toward themselves, and creates this society, this bubble of experiences where people feel worse and worse and worse. And yet they think wrongly that the answer is to look prettier or create a better filter or get plastic surgery or get skinnier. And that's never the answer, right? So I do think that it's understanding what is the culture that you're building on the platform in the product, not just what do users want. Because if you go to what do users want, you're going to get data
No, I completely understand.
more
Yeah.
cigarettes, right? Or they want to look prettier in their Instagram. And so you're going to create these really toxic products by creating really toxic culture. Now, I'll tell you one of the things we did on Nextdoor, because we had a team who had also come from Facebook, and they had been, kind of in their culture of A/B testing, and we should just A/B test everything, and whatever is the most engaging experience, we should ship that. And we had an amazing product leader, and she was a data scientist by training, and she said, "Wait a second, I'm for every product that we have a question about, but it shows like in an A/B test, shorter term engagement, right? So we would A/B test things for 2 weeks, right? We'd get those numbers, and then it would be either more engaging or not." And she said, "Wait a second, I want to see how neighborhoods what the engagement is like in different neighborhoods if they have this experience versus not after 6 months. She's like, because in the short term, I understand how this can be more engaging in a 2-week experiment. But in the long term, we need to really ask, what kind of culture is this, is this experience creating on our platform? And will we lose engagement in the longer run? And the same experience that showed an increase in engagement in a 2-week A/B test showed decreased engagement in a 6-month. So longer term thinking is really required also in really effectively understanding what the data means and effectively using data. And this is another reason why your executives, if you're not doing this, your executives hopefully are a little bit older and more experienced than many of the data science people. Hopefully, again, we can talk a lot about when they're not and the kind of bad decisions that might be made. But hopefully, your executives have seen rodeos before that maybe your junior PMs haven't, and they might have a longer term perspective on what's being created in the product. Experience really matters, right? And they might have seen in their, career and companies they've worked in the past, where short-term decision making based on data has led to bad outcomes. So again, it's not that the executives are dumb or they say they want to be data driven, but they ignore it. It's just that they have a different perspective. And sometimes it's a more mature and experienced perspective. So again, ask questions about what would your executives like to see next? Is there a longer term perspective that we might add into the analysis, right? And are there questions that they have from their experience, right, that are influencing how they're interpreting the data? Because here's the thing, data in and of itself is meaningless. There's the data, and then there's how you interpret the data.
Good point.
And there's two very, very different things.
Asking the right questions, asking deeper questions, and asking follow-up questions. And like you just mentioned, the long-term thinking is something that is hard if you're judged by quarter to quarter and your scope is small, right? Like I've heard this anecdotally from folks that at Facebook, when you run an A/B test, the significance is reached in less than 4 minutes because you have so many people on Facebook that if you set up your confidence interval as like 1% or 5%, it's reached so fast that you don't even run the experiment for 2 weeks. So in which case
you get a whole bunch of 4-minute decisions, and where does
right.
that lead? It
Yes.
leads you to court, is where it leads in the long run. That's where it leads, honestly. And it leads to bad elections. It leads to fake accounts. It leads to misinformation, and it leads to teenagers killing themselves. That's where it leads when you make those really short-term myopic decisions. In the short term, your stock price might go up if you're paying off a lot of legislators in Congress and you've got a lot of lobbyists running around, you can get away with it. But will it never catch up to you? We'll see. We'll see if it finally catches up to them. But in any case, for PMs and product leaders who have a sense of moral compass inside themselves, right? This is probably something that we should be asking, right? Is how do I make the right decisions? Where is this going? How do I know, right, that this is the right decision? What kind of culture am I creating inside my product? And am I actually working collaboratively and listening to other people? Or am I just blindly interpreting my data in the way that, is a kind of a tunnel vision kind of perspective?
No, absolutely. This is so helpful, Tatyana, to like sort of take the blinders out a little bit and think about it from a perspective of a holistic perspective. I want to ask you a follow-up question. So there are times when, so let's say a PM comes in with some data and asks, deep questions. There are times when, senior executives have access to a lot of information, not just quantitative data, but also what's happening at the company level. Maybe you're trying to purchase a company. There's an M&A transaction that's underway, or maybe you're uh, planning to, spin off a division, or hiring some big executive to manage a problem or what have
Mhm.
you. And this is sort of sensitive information that comes to executives. And I've been in situations where there were some decisions being made by executives, and that raised my eyebrows because I've been on the M&A side, and I can see, I can read the tea leaves.
Mhm.
And of course, I've asked the question: are we selling the company? Are we shutting down this unit? Talk to me about that. Like, how do you handle that?
Well, okay. So the first thing that I think everyone should understand that in a normal business environment, the executives, what they need to do is just raise the stock price of the company and make any moves that will do that. So if you have equity in the company, you should remember that ideally whatever they're doing is aligned with your financial interests because you are also a shareholder in the company. So if you own equity in your company, think like a shareholder. Don't just think like an employee. It will help a lot. Trust me, in these emotional ways. Now, does that mean your division might get shut down, or there might be kind of an issue that affects your own personal employment situation? There might be. But again, if you just say like, look, I'm not just an employee, but I'm also a shareholder in this company, right? Can you at least shift into that shareholder mindset and then say, I understand why this is being done as a shareholder? So I do think that's one of the things that I talk to my teams a lot about, especially in one-on-ones, is when people get frustrated, and they do get frustrated because they start to see tea leaves, or they start to question the strategy, or they start to feel really personally defensive, right, about some strategic move or a reorg that might be being made, or the fact that somebody might lose their job, or maybe they might lose their job, or there's going to be a layoff or whatever. People get very emotionally upset. And what I try to help my teams, my direct reports and skip levels understand is that, yes, your job might be affected, my job might be affected, but if you just look at this as a shareholder in the company, which you are, can you understand why this is happening? And by the way, if if they can get out of that mindset of just the emotional place, that, I think, perspective helps a lot. Does that answer your question? I mean, it's really looking at what are the decisions being made, and if you think about the data-driven decision being what's the move right now that will increase our share price the most, is the one that's probably the most important. That reframes a lot of these things.
Sounds good. Rose, are you saying that the stream is not live by any chance?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just gonna check right now. I think we might be in the wrong link.
I see it live on my account as well.
Okay, because I see some messages and comments on the LinkedIn Live, um, and it says the event will start soon.
Hmm.
And yeah, I see some comments, so I'm just gonna try to get to that link and post it in that comment.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Rose,
no
for
worries.
looking into it. I appreciate it. Um, we'll continue. If for some reason we had issues with it, I will have a video of this conversation. I will post it again so people can watch it if there's a problem right now to join. But we'll continue the conversation. We have Tatyana's time with us. Um, so, Tatyana, tell us a little bit about, like, So we talked about two very data-driven organizations that you've been part of. One was like slightly different from the other. Um, but let's talk about one thing you just said. Data doesn't tell you everything, right? Data is dumb. And like, how do you think, for instance, we talked about how to present data to up level, sort of upstream and then get information back. Let's talk about like ground level. What do you think a product leader should be thinking about on a daily basis where, within their own scope, to try and make sense of data even before they go upstream and try to get buy-in from folks?
Yeah. I also, as you mentioned, I think worked at Amazon. And
Yes.
as I was leaving Amazon in 2018, Jeff Bezos had an all hands meeting, and I will never forget this. And it's actually it's documented somewhere as well. And he said that, look, we at Amazon, we're a very data driven, company. Lots and lots of dashboards everywhere, right? Talk about like the scale, right? At Facebook, there's also a huge scale at Amazon, so everything is tracked as a data point. And he said, I think we've gone a little, like, here I'm paraphrasing, and then I'll tell you like what was the exact, basically his message was, we've gone a little too far in terms of
Mm.
what we're using data for. And he said, it's often the anecdotes that tell you a lot more, especially if you're dealing with product innovation, than any data points that you currently have. And he said the following, and I often quote this. He said, when the anecdotes and the data conflict, trust the anecdotes, you're probably measuring wrong. And I would say that in a world where so many things are changing, remember that the dashboards that you've set up, even the categories of the data that you collect, are all based on historical knowledge. They do not tell you about anything that is emergent or anything that is emerging, because you have not thought to collect those data points. Those data points did not exist when you created these dashboards. So if you are looking only at dashboards, if you are making most of your decisions based on the dashboards that you have, you're probably missing a lot, because you're missing the anecdotes that show you what are the emergent needs, what are the emergent experiences, what are the emergent values that are happening in society, right, among your customers, right, or in your industry. And so that's where I think it's really, really important for a product leader to be talking face to face with customers. And I really mean face to face. I don't mean Zoom calls. I don't mean focus groups. I don't mean just sales meetings. I'm living in the life world of your customer, meeting them, if you're in a B2B company, in their offices, seeing what they're doing, understanding what they're experiencing. If you're in a B2C business, again, being with your customers, where they are. It's really funny because Steve Jobs, when he was alive, I have a bunch of friends who live like right in downtown Palo Alto. And one of them, told me once that he would see Steve Jobs in the Apple store in downtown Palo Alto. And I was like, do you really think Steve Jobs needs to go to the Apple store to get his like new headphones or whatever? Like, he was there observing his customers in their life world, watching how they interact with the products, watching what they do, right? And probably he spent a lot of time watching people interact around music when they were not using Apple products, right? Because what is emerging, what is emergent, right, for him. So I do think that it's very important for a product leader to know how to lead into data, and then also understand that data is, one, by definition, historical. You're never going to know the future by looking at data from the past. Never. You are never going to know that. Okay. That's one. And two, if you really understand statistics, you understand that there's always type 1 and type 2 error. So how do
Absolutely.
you even, I mean, it's never the truth, right? It's always just maybe the truth, depending on your confidence interval, as you said, Rana. And so, um, and so again, really understanding statistics, really knowing how to interpret the data, but also knowing where to find what's emergent and how to anticipate the future, which is really what a product leader should be doing, especially as you rise up through the ranks, right? Is you need to be anticipating the future more than just looking at what's happened in the past. And for that, as Jeff Bezos reminds us, for that, you have to be deep in the anecdotes. And as Steve Jobs remind us, you need to be deep in the life world of your customer, not looking at dashboards.
That's such an amazing answer, Tatyana. I remember when I was taking investment management class at business school, uh, my professor, who was one of the named people in investment management, he studied under Eugene Fama in French.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these guys actually were Nobel Prize laureates in finance. Um, and he would talk about making decisions, investment decisions, like driving Ferrari by looking in the rearview mirror, right?
Exactly.
That's exactly what you're saying. Data collected is all historical, and you kind of have to know that, but you also have to look at what's coming towards you from the front, from the side, from everywhere to make a decision. So you're not just looking at the rear view mirror. And he likes to say Ferrari because you know how some people are into those type of cars. But
I do. Yes.
I
I
that
worked at
kind of
IDEO. Yes. They're all into
yeah,
Ferraris. Yes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're all into Ferraris. Not that I can afford one, but I'm still thinking. But it was a very nice way to put it, to be
Yeah.
honest. And it
Exactly.
scared me, right? Like I remember him telling me he went to I won't say the name because uh, he went to someone. He was talking to someone about sort of how the stock market moves and whatnot, and this person just like predicted where the share price would end up, and that's sort of comes with experience. It doesn't just come with looking at back data, right? So it was interesting. So it just kind of reminded me of that
There's
experience.
something called field for the game, field for the game. So this is, there's this famous saying, right? You skate to where the hockey puck is going to be. You don't skate to where it is right now, right? So we all know that. And the job of any product leader is to skate to where the hockey puck is going to be, given when you think your engineering team is going to be able to deliver this thing. Okay. So like that's it's actually a product leader than it is to be a hockey player, because it's not just based on how fast you can skate. It's based on how fast all these engineers, right, can put the thing together. So you have to be really good at estimating how quickly engineers can do something, and collaborating with them and being right on that. And you have to be really good also at understanding where is culture and society and where our customer is going to be ready for at the moment when your engineers can deliver that thing, right? So that's actually what the job of the product leader is to put those two things together and understand how to make money from that. But if you build something good enough that people are willing to pay for, you can probably figure that part out. So um so the point I'm trying to make here is that, yes, where you're trying to go, and as you rise in your product career, looking out and developing a feel for the game, anticipating where is the market going to be, and then developing confidence by bringing together lots of different anecdotes and pieces of data, some of which may not have ever mattered to your company and that your company has never even thought about. But you bring in, something from a report that was done by some firm, and then you bring in, some titles from some headlines, right, in the media, and then you bring in some information based on some customers that you observed, right, and you bring pictures, right, of the things that they're like. It's less interesting what they say It's more
Hmm.
interesting if you can bring photos or videos of things that they're doing that is emergent phenomena that's kind of lining up with these other things that are happening in the world. And that's how you develop that feel for the game. And that's how you start skating to where the hockey puck is going to be.
I want to ask you one question here. This is something that came up in user research many times, and sometimes I have hard time explaining to people why I disagree with insights that user research puts together. Um, so people will say, you go up to a person and say, "Hey, is this a problem?" They'll say yes,
Mhm.
but in reality, they may not actually take that action. So they'll say, "Would you use this product?" Yes, will be a nice polite answer, but then in reality they may never use the product. So talk to me about that, like, sort of, how do what's your experience there in terms of just this, like, conflicting information, like people will do something but say something else.
So the first thing is that you need, in order to do good user research, you need to have good sociologists and anthropologists. It's just like having good engineering. You can't have good engineering unless you have really great computer scientists. You're just not going to get a very, very good engineering. So, like,
True.
I mean, you know, so your user research team should be made up of people who are very, very good social scientists. Number one. Same thing. You like social science is just like computer science. Some people are trained to do it, and some people try to fake it or took a, whatever, 2-week boot camp and can learn on the job, but you're going to get very different quality from the two. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's the first thing that everybody just needs to understand. It actually is a science. So when I hear things like that, when I hear research that is, we put this in front of people and 84% said that they would use it, that's just bad social science. I'm sorry, it's just
Yeah.
no social scientist would take that seriously, right?
No,
And by
I,
the way,
I hear you.
those surveys are completely useless because what people say is totally different than what you do. You ask people in a survey, how many days a week do you exercise? And they'll be like 4 or more.
And that's
Exactly.
1 week in a year.
Right. Well, right. But like, I mean, it's not what people say, especially if you're showing them something that you've created, especially if you're paying them by the minute, especially if they want to be paid again for another study, they're going to try to please you. There is no downside of them saying, "Oh yeah, this is a great idea." No downside to them.
Yeah.
It's just garbage research by people who don't know what they're doing. What you want is you want deep ethnographic research. You want research where you're understanding, again, it's the Steve Jobs and the Apple store, right? Observing people when they don't necessarily know that they're being observed. If people say something where you can say, "Oh, show me how you do this now." If somebody says to you, "I exercise 4 days a week," be like, "Great. Show me the exercises that you do."
Show me the data.
No, no, just like show me what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
see how they respond. Are they like, "Oh, well, do they pull it out and they're like, "Oh, well, here's my, online bar class that I do, and then here's my studio that I go to, and let me show you how many times I've checked into the studio," right? Like you you got to do good research.
True. True. And
So
even just
I actually think
asking.
most of the time it's just people who don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
conducting survey research and not actually knowing how to double click and question it. And then the other thing is, yeah, you have to like be able to actually know what you're doing there. There's also biased samples, right? If you're only talking to current customers, you're going to get a very biased sample.
Sure.
So all those kinds of things, again, good actual social scientists will know how to deal with all of that.
No, absolutely. I think leading questions is one of the biggest killer when it comes to research. And I remember one of the companies that I worked at. User research was basically just user testing.
So user testing is great once you've already figured out what the product is, to see, like, is it easier to click on this or is it easier to click on that? Like, if you, I mean, I do a lot of user testing, like in my
User
team,
testing is great, but do not like use
but
that
it's not
as
research.
no, it's not. Yeah, it's not. That's exactly what bothered me about it. And also, like, absolutely, like for small optimizations, whether they can find something or not, whether or not they're able to use it, is very different from their deeper needs and their sort of hopes and motivations and sort of like their pain points that they're not even talking about, right?
Right.
So those are the
I have a tip for product leaders. So if a user research team comes back and says, look, 84% of people, really want this, ask them why. Why do they want it? What are they currently doing now that they will stop doing or do differently if they have this? Again, a good researcher will have answered that question in their mind, and then
yeah.
you'll get a lot more confidence as to what they're saying, right? Because the 84% of people said that they would buy this or they would use this is meaningless if you don't know the why and what they're going to do, like what they're going to like there's always like a substitution thing, right?
Yeah.
They're like, what are they not going to do because they do this? Again, and good user research will always
Good user.
ask.
Yes, absolutely. I actually, it brings up a point. One of my friends built a whole business. He did a research with a target customer that he thought was right, talked to them and said, would you use this product? And everyone gave a thumbs up.
Of course.
And he built the whole thing, went back to them, and they're like, we can't change our workflows right now. And
Yep.
3 years of work. I
And
just
user
it
research.
hurts. Yeah, exactly, right?
Well, that's why, like, actually hire somebody with a master's or a PhD in sociology or anthropology, to at least lead the team, so that they can mentor other people or call bullshit when it's actually bad research, right? But when
Absolutely.
you have people who don't even have a background, right? Because again, if you have a background in actual social science, right, you'll have the statistics background, you'll have a lot of times, a very good understanding of regression analysis as well. Plus, you'll understand how to do good qualitative research, right, around all of those biases, right, that you find. And that's how you avoid those types of mistakes.
Thank you, Tatyana. Do we have any questions coming in, Rose, or are
Yeah,
people?
yeah. Unfortunately, because the link was posted to different it was different than the LinkedIn Live
We're
uh
not seeing any
link that we have.
questions?
Yeah, we're not seeing any questions.
That's
Um,
okay.
yeah.
That's okay. Rose, do you have any questions? We're like 12 minutes away. I want to give you a chance to also ask questions.
Yeah, not a question, more of some thought about what you said about being a leader. So I saw somewhere today or yesterday's post about where leaders are supposed to look through a telescope, so they're supposed to zoom out, whereas non-leaders are supposed to look through a microscope, so they're supposed to zoom in, and it's a leader's job. And they're supposed to collaborate together to come up with a holistic view of everything. And it's pretty interesting when you talked about sorry, culture, contacts, and and also like having a leader who could foresee that, right? Foresee that, and also um to ask you questions so it could lead you to a better um insight, I guess. That's amazing, and important. um but I guess follow up to that, now that I do have a question. I do have a question. Like, what if I do have a leader? I'm working under someone, right? An executive, and I do have a leader who doesn't have that foresight. Or what do I do? Do I just ask a lot of questions to help them get there, or how do I go about that?
Um, well, I'm going to say something that may be very controversial, but you're a
Go for
young
it, Tatyana.
you're a young person,
Yes.
Look for another job or look for another manager, because mentoring, especially when you're early in your career, is really, really important. Working for great people that you want to be like 20 years from now is critically important. So, so number one, start looking for a different manager, either within your organization or outside your organization. Um, and someone who does have that foresight, someone who, you are learning from, right? And I remember one of my very first jobs, actually, I worked on Wall Street for 2 summers, and I really liked the work. I was doing bond market analysis, and it was a lot of econometrics and a lot of data stuff, as you talked about, Ron, in an investment firm, investment management. But I looked around after the second summer and they offered me a full-time job after college. And I said, do I want to be like any of these people 10 years from now? And the answer was no. There was not a single person that I felt like, yeah, I want to be just like that guy, or I want to be just like that woman on the bond trading floor or whatever. And they just, it's so important that you work for people that you feel are the types of leaders that you want to become. So that's my little soapbox there. Very important to work for people that you respect, that you admire, and that will be, by the way, these people are your greatest assets for the rest of your career.
Absolutely.
And Ron, maybe you can tell some stories, but my very first 2 bosses out of college are still my good friends, right? They provided me incredible references for, decades after I worked with them. I mean, they are such important people in my life. And find those people. Don't work for people who are not inspirational and that you don't admire.
Absolutely. And I'll share a few examples here, Rose. Also, like I worked for someone, I want to say in the 90s, late 90s, mid or late 90s, and I was there for a couple of years. I built their product from ground up. I was an engineer, actually, hands-on engineer at that point. They had failed to build this product multiple times, and they hired the team, which included me, and we made it successful because no one else was paying attention to user experience. And I took the stance of we need to look at user experience before we build anything else, and that solved the problem. And he was so happy with me. That product actually won many, many awards in New York State and city. It was helping older people apply for benefits, and older people who are on Social Security and things like that, who really were frail and didn't have a lot of time and probably didn't have resources, right? Um, and I left the company at one point and joined New York Stock Exchange. And 3 years later, so I left, and 2 years later or so, I was applying to business school. And so I started trying to figure out who should I ask for a reference, right? They asked for a couple of references. So I found him, my boss from the New York City Department for the Aging, and went up to him and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. I don't know if I'll get in because I was only applying to Warden. Long behold, didn't have the time to apply to multiple schools, and I was like, I have no idea if I'm going to make it, but can you write me a reference?" And he said, "Sure, more than happy to." And not only that, he actually had a hip surgery around the time when he had to actually submit the application. And he made sure someone on his team had access to everything he needed to give access to so he could actually send my recommendation on time. And, I haven't been in touch with him for a long time now, but I always think of that as a gesture that he did. And something must have moved him about me. But at the same time, he really cared about me. And there's another, manager of mine. I remember working for him post MBA, post banking career. I did work in banking, Tatyana, and I know 6 months and through it. I was like, I don't want to be here. This is crazy. And I got out. So after that, I worked for a CEO of a company that was sort of late stage startup. And he would just look at data that I would present to him because I was in corporate finance at that time, and say, okay, there's this one cell, there's something wrong here, go check it. Like spend 5 minutes on my data. And I spent 3 hours on it. Or maybe a whole day. Who knows,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know somebody like that. Yeah.
Oh God. And I go home, go back, and I would be like fuming inside, obviously, right? But I would go back and check and say, yes, there was a problem there. And so and he did this consistently all the time. Obviously, he had a lot more context than I did.
Right.
But that actually was one of the people that I sort of looked up to and said, I want to be that person that can look at the data and like synthesize it in very, very short period of time and then be able to say what's right or wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it drove me to become more strategic. I questioned myself. I still man myself. But like, having those sort of people in life can really change your like growth pattern because
Yeah.
it sometimes pisses you off, and then that's what makes you go and climb that hill.
Yeah.
And just like Tatyana is sharing, right? Like long-term thinking, and like having better user research and taking user research seriously, not just sort of looking at it peripherally. These are all learnings that are amazing that I've had from various folks, even folks who reported into me, not just folks whom I managed or reported into. Um, so Tatyana, we are almost at time. We have 3 minutes left, but this was such an incredible conversation. I really want to thank you for your time and eloquent answers. You were so patient. I asked you all kinds of questions that I came up on a spur of a moment, but I enjoyed it and I learned a few things from you that I'm going to take with me beyond this conversation. Um, and thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
both. Thank you both. It was a real pleasure to chat with you. And remember, people your executives are often looking at bigger pictures, hopefully longer time frames, and hopefully they're more experienced and older than you. And there's a lot that you can learn just by asking them more questions and more context. So I think those are some of the key things that I'd love people to remember and take away when they're engaging their executives.
Well, we're going to end the stream now. And happy Friday to everyone. Peace be everywhere. Let's remember we're all humans here, and taking a look at all of us from a human perspective is always helpful. So, as a mother, as a woman, as a tech entrepreneur, and as a Muslim, I pray for peace for everyone. So, thank you again. Bye.